We are always so happy when Laura Lester of the South Carolina Department of Agriculture Certified Foods Division comes on. And Laura, we welcome you today as always, and we welcome you for also bringing a guest.
Yes, ma'am. I have Ken DuBard here with the Congaree Milling Company right in Columbia, South Carolina. And Ken, you've been in this business for quite a while now, and you guys produce a variety of products. Why don't you tell us what all you brought with you here today?
Sure, we've got a number of things. We've actually got some yellow quick grits. We're going to do a little demo on how to cook these. We also have some coarse cornmeal today. You can actually see some of it right here. We have some blue grits. Now, you don't see blue corn grits every day, but they behave pretty much like any other kind of stone ground grits. And we actually have a little bit of roasted yellow polenta here, and you can actually see some of the gradation in the different grind size of these, and that also indicates cooking time. The larger the particle, the longer it takes to cook.
And this is all organic corn.
It's from certified organic corn, yes.
And when you're going to turn corn into grits, you want certain types of corn that are particularly hard and have different qualities, don't you?
Well, yes. It can go many different ways. For example, in Italy, there's a traditional kind of corn that they use that's a little more denty because you have your dent in your flint corns. But yes, what's really special about all these is that they're a whole grain product. And they have not been degermed, and therefore they have a lot of flavor. But there is a trade-off. You generally want to store any whole grain stone ground grits. These are also stone ground. In your freezer is the best place for it.
Okay. And you guys do things the old-fashioned way, Ken, which I think always makes things even better. So you're going to show us how to do that, right?
Yeah, well, let's get to it.
Yeah.
First thing we're going to do is we're going to try our hand at cooking some yellow quick grits. Now, with any stone ground grits, I like to start cold. And the reason you want to do that is so you can wash your grits. Now, that sounds kind of...
And why would you want to wash your grits?
Well, with the more basic production techniques, with stone grinding and essentially hand cleaning, we just use some catch bowls and sieves pretty much. You're going to have a little bit of pericarp. That's the stuff that gets stuck in your teeth when you eat popcorn left in. So you want to get that out, and really we just...
So it doesn't hurt you, you just think that it makes the eating experience a little nicer.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, I've never washed my grits, so this is going to make them even tastier, right? That extra little step.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn this on high here. So we go up to high temp, if I can get the oven on. And we're going to stir for literally about 60 seconds. And we'll probably...
1,000, 1,000.
We'll probably amend this a little bit for time.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you what ratio you use with 1 cup of grits. How much water do you usually use?
Well, we start with 3 to 1, but almost always I wind up adding a little bit
extra.
And so that's why we have some hot water here on the stove, because it's easiest to add hot water. It doesn't slow down your cooking process.
I thought you were trying to make my hair curl by having the steam
Well,
go.
we've definitely got a lot of steam going on. So I've been stirring the grits for about a minute. And there'll be some stuff floating around on top. Now, this is perfectly edible. It's just a little bit extra fiber, but it can be kind of chewy. So the way I like to take care of it is to just use a tea strainer. We're going to strain this stuff out. You don't have to get it all, but this will make a smoother pot of grits. So at this point, we've got a good bit of that gone.
We do. Okay.
We're going to keep it on high here. And essentially, you just stir every few minutes. Once you get to a boil, you're going to, you stir until you get to a boil. Then you reduce the heat and stir every few minutes. And it takes about a half an hour from start to finish for these quick grits.
And these are quick grits. Now, how much salt do you put in usually to start with?
Usually, I will put in, at this point in time, I'll put in about a teaspoon per dry cup.
All right.
And that can be amended later. You can bring that up to where it needs to be later if you require more.
And you said if people want to use things like bouillon or chicken broth, then you need to be careful not to oversalt.
Well, yes, be careful if you're using commercial stock. If you haven't made the stock, like chicken stock, for example, yourself, look out for the salt because it can get intense fairly quickly.
And I like a little bit of spice, so do you usually add a little bit of pepper as well?
I'll add, generally, the only 2 things I always require in my grits are salt and butter.
Butter, definitely a requirement.
And plenty of both, but I usually put a bit of the salt in at the beginning, about a teaspoon per dry cup, and then put some butter in at the end, about a tablespoon per dry cup. And then keep in mind, a dry cup of grits will make around 3 cups of finished grits.
Very good. Well, what about the polenta? Show us
how we do that. All right, well, polenta is super easy. I actually prefer to prepare this at home because it's you can skip the washing step.
You don't have to wash the polenta. Perfect.
Yeah. So we got water boiling here. Pardon me, Amanda.
And the polenta is a finer grind.
Generally a finer grind. Now in Italy, there's a special more denty corn they use.
But here, you just use
a little finer, and
Okay.
you know, we use flintier corns when we can find them.
Do you use the same ratio?
Yes, you start with the same ratio, but you're going to stir this in, and the reason you do that is to break up lumps.
Okay.
And so it's going to thicken up fairly quickly.
Whoa, it sure is. Gosh.
Oh, here, let's just put a little bit of water in there.
Okay.
Probably we had some boil off. So this is why you want to keep a little bit of hot water on the stove when you're doing this, because you won't get behind by
Add
putting
as
cold water.
needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's thickening up pretty well there. And once you see the water start to boil again, or the stock or whatever, you can even use a little bit of cream in either of these, cream, milk, whatever you prefer. Then at this point, you're going to go and you're just going to put a little bit of salt in there. Stir
And
it
maybe
in.
pepper,
Some-
if you're in Laura's kitchen.
Well, you know, I would definitely put some of that in, but probably later
Wait
in
till
the
the
process.
end so
Okay.
that you don't lose the flavor.
And yes, definitely. And also, you probably want to finish your polenta with maybe some butter and some Parmesan cheese, some freshly grated
Yum.
Parmesan Reggiano, or really any kind of cheese works well in grits or polenta.
Now,
in my opinion.
polenta is the one where generally you pour it out into a casserole dish and let it cool. Is that correct?
Yes, that's often chilled and then cut into pieces, and you can saute that. You can even bread and fry it if you like.
That sounds good.
It is. It really is
Very
good.
good.
So here we have a way of bringing back one of the traditional staples of South Carolina. And this is probably the reason why it became such a staple. I imagine a lot of people would grind their own corn, and they were using that whole kernel recipe tradition that you're using now with the stone ground method.
Definitely. It wasn't until much later in the milling tradition that they were able to actually remove the corn germ and to sort of fractionally mill. And then a little bit later than that, generally most mills were wet milling, which has nothing to do with grits, something totally different. So,
Well, and one thing I think that I've been fortunate to do is I've started putting it in the freezer, and I think that helps to save the flavor when you have one that otherwise doesn't have such a long shelf life.
absolutely. See, the real key to all this is with the whole grain grits, with grits that are not degermed, there's oils in there. Now that's going to carry the flavor, so you're going to get a lot more flavor from those products, but it's not going to last forever on your shelf. So if you ever get your grits from any good grist mill, go ahead and store it in the freezer or the refrigerator if you don't have room, and you're going to get a lot more shelf life.
And that's something I didn't know until you can.
Well, if you're buying the good stuff, it's good good thing to know.
Yeah, and Amanda, I'll tell you, I've had the pleasure of trying several of Ken's different products. You can find them at several different restaurants in the Columbia area, and they are all delicious, so I
Thanks.
can't recommend them enough.